You got a story the world needs to hear, a spark inside that's crystal clear. No more hiding in the digital crowd. It's time to stand up, speak out loud. Every dream starts with a single sound. Your message matters, let it resound. The spotlight's waiting, the mic is yours. Step into the moment, open the doors. Your voice, your vision, your stage. Turn the page, ignite the rage. From whispers to waves, let your truth engage. Your voice, your vision, your stage. You try to
Rose, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Don't know. Were you able to hear that intro?
I did hear the intro,
You did
and
hear
then
the
somebody
intro.
wrote
Fantastic.
no audio. So
There's no audio?
I don't
All
know.
right.
Somebody wrote no audio. I don't know.
So why don't we start again now that we have audio? Thanks for adding that, Leslie. So today we're joined by my guest, an extraordinary storyteller, digital creator who has used journalism, live streaming, and global conversations to elevate women's voices around the world. Rose Horowitz is a Pulitzer-nominated journalist, content creator, and social media expert. She's the founder of #WomenToFollow, a global hashtag that reached 12 million views in just 2 weeks. We're going to hear a little more about that in just a moment. And the host of Women to Follow live stream show. Fantastic. We have you on camera. We have Jay in the background. Jay, how you doing? Are you there, Jay? All right. Seems like we may be having technical difficulties. Not to worry. I am just pleased. Let me come up on camera and join.
Oh, somebody said, my colleague, there was no audio on the intro, but now hearing everything.
Fantastic.
Okay.
That's what we
Thank you,
like.
Stefan.
All right. We had some technical issues. We sorted through those technical issues, and now we have the show on the road. Fantastic. Here I am.
Okay. There you are.
There I am. I'm going to give you the spotlight here, give you the fantastic. Now, why don't we take a moment and thank and welcome some of our guests. We have guests joining and listening in. Keith joining us from Melbourne. We have, just give me a second here. We have Jay trying to get back into the studio. Stefan, looking forward to this conversation, as am I, and as are our guests. I know we have a lot of excitement around this. I was getting a lot of chatter and a lot of commenting happening across the emails that I was sending and the promotions that I was pushing out. This is an exciting time. Let's bring Jay in and have him part of this conversation as well. Jay, how you doing? Let's move. Oh,
Hi, Jay.
Jay, you're on mute. It's one of those days where tech does what tech does best. It. All right, let's bring him back in. Oh, dear. All right, let's bring Jay in again. Jay, come on in. Okay, now we got no camera for Jay. Jay, we can't see you. Well, never a dull moment with tech. What we learned moments ago that sound quality gets impacted by a different. I was using Microsoft Edge, and Rose was able to hear a little buzz, and I switched over to Chrome, and it cleaned it up. So, word for anyone who is live streaming that. It does make a difference. Sometimes it's not your tech. I thought it was my mixer. We rebooted, and now we learned that if you want to stream and you want a better streaming quality, Chrome might be the go-to. And we still have Jay unable to join. Jay, are you there? Can you hear us? All right. Now we got Jay back on camera, and we still can't hear you. Fascinating.
Test.
Hey, now we got Jay. Jay, we can hear you. Awesome.
Man,
All right.
reminds me of the days of legacy media.
Well, we've clearly demonstrated that we can troubleshoot in real time and let everyone know that, hey, these are the joys of live streaming. There's so much preparation that goes into live streaming. We had the tech all lined up. We had everything ready to go. But it also speaks to what I like to refer to as, coming up in real time. And listen, we're going to be vulnerable, and tech sometimes is going to play a role in that vulnerability. It's how we respond, how we troubleshoot, and how we connect with our audience. So thanks, everyone, for sticking around while we work this out. Rose, I do start off by, once again, thanking you for joining me today. Why don't you kick this off and introduce yourself, who you are, and all the lovely things that brings Rose and her story and her narrative to today's conversation. And I will slowly start bringing Chad in, and let's get this party started. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, great to meet everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here, and I see some friends and new people on the chat, which is really exciting. I am a journalist and the founder of Woman to Follow, which became which trended on Twitter before when it was Twitter, and had 12 million views in its first 12 days, first 2 weeks. And the idea is to amplify women's voices. And I've been profiling different women. First, I was doing it on Medium, and then during the pandemic, I became involved in producing shows. And people said, "Well, where's your show?" So here I am. So I've been doing my own show with. I've done like 35 shows and a big summit, and have interviewed women from all around the world and in all different fields.
That's fantastic. Where's your show? What were your first thoughts when people started asking? It's like, where's my show? And gee, I never even thought of a show and, having a spotlight of my own. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, it became, I guess you could say it was a step up the ladder in that I've been a writer for a long time and have been in print and then digital, but had never really done broadcast. I did write for radio in my first job, but I wasn't on screen. And during the pandemic, a colleague of mine who's a journalist and a professor who taught for 20 years at Columbia Journalism School said, he'd love to do a live stream show about COVID. This was just like as COVID March 13th was hitting. And we had taken a social media event that was supposed to be in Manhattan, and we had made it virtual. And he said on this virtual, like, is anybody here interested? So I was like, yeah, I'm interested. So I became a producer along with a woman who was in grad school, Vandana Menon, and we did 250 consecutive days of shows about all aspects of the pandemic and then when the pandemic slowed down, we did some like weekly ones. And I also then, there were two doctors in New York who really wanted to get out the truth and, information about COVID and highlight what doctors were doing and updating people on COVID, news that was happening. And I became a producer for that show, which was a weekly show called She's on Call. And but as I was doing the shows with Sri, this is live, right? So we've had instances where two reporters from the Washington Post who had just written a book were supposed to join us, and Sri for last minute couldn't be there and said, "Okay, Rose, take it over." Like you're it. So so I did, and so I began interviewing. Because I booked many of the guests, and we sort of had guidelines for making sure it was diverse, and we had gender guidelines and diversity guidelines, and I was booking a lot of the guests, and then I would then come on and interview them. Like, so if it was an author or a poet, or and I would and then sometimes fill in and be the host, and then, so I got some experience being on camera, and it's not that different from, asking questions off camera, but, like you put the same skills to work a lot of ways. And then people like in the social network who would watch the show, because we had a community of people who would watch every night, and there was nothing to do during the pandemic, and we had a global audience. Sri is from India, and we had people from Europe watching, and in Asia and US, and it became a community really, because people would say, so great to be here, or this happened to me today, sometimes in the comments, and we, like you are doing, share comments, and it was people really looked forward to it because it was live, and people got to know each other.
That's right. I'm going to lean in here for a second because it was live, and it's so important when it comes to whether it's storytelling or whether it comes to maybe even if it's a sales pitch. Nothing beats a real conversation. And I queued up storytelling and social impact. And here's a little story. I've been told by my friend Jay that I I pair our guests up in such a fashion that there's always some form of connection. In today's connection, I am sharing the stage with one former journalist and one journalist, and I am so proud that I'm able to do this, and I do it without really realizing how I'm able to align these stories, these narratives. And I'm going to let Jay jump in before I ask the first question and we kick this off. Jay, how do you think this happens?
Well, I think one of the things that I think aligns with a lot of our guests. First off, we have a great title for the show. I think that really does bring it home, though, because I think when people reach out, or when you reach out, there's always the fact that this title is there, and we know that at some point maybe there's something to share. But I've always said this, Americo. Storytelling is at the core of how human beings communicate. So there's always going to be alignment. And whether we're former journalists or whether we've worked in corporate America in the healthcare industry, we're always going to be able to communicate with one another because that's what we do as human beings. And we do it a majority of the time through stories. I think that's just the basic thing that we all have in common, right? And when we share our stories, then we see even more commonality, more alignment, and I think that brings us together. And I'm going to plug you for a second because you've got this great community growing on School, and I think that's really how we're going to be able to grow that community is through how we share our stories. And so, I mean, that's why I jumped on when you asked me in the very beginning of all of this, because truly storytelling is encoded in my DNA and in all of us. Some of us, we just have it at the surface more so than other folks. Others, it takes a little bit of time to develop and to grow, but we are all storytellers at the core. So, and before you kind of go on with some of your questions, I want to have I want to have a little discussion with our guest here. So I read a little bit, and I'm very honored that you did join us because I know what it's like to be on the opposite end of that pen or that keyboard, and being a part of some really big stories that we didn't normally in the beginning even think of would explode into something so big. But so I'll give a prime example. You know, I was doing a story. I thought about this guy who passed away, and he had a lot of money, and it turned into something even bigger than that. It was a lot of people coming out of the woodwork claiming to be someone with this guy and had a baby, and he was a big figure, and they didn't know who he was. He did a lot of crazy things. He was the H in DHL, the big shipping company, right? International. And if you saw him on the street, he looked, I hate to say this, he looked like he was a beach bum. He had cut off shorts, a white t-shirt, some flip-flops. He would go into the store just like that. Just like that. But when I started doing the story on him, I didn't realize just how big a story this was going to be until NBC and their camera crew plopped themselves down in front of me and tried to take the story from me. So that's when I knew there was something here. So I just wanted to ask, in those moments where you're writing the story, you know that you want to make an impact and provide the best story possible. Have you ever said to yourself, I know this is going to be big. I know this is going to hit the international news. Have you ever considered some of those things when you were writing?
Uh, I think, yeah, once you start developing a story, sometimes people, like in your case, come out of the woodwork and say, hey, and sometimes they're negative comments. Oftentimes that kind of leads you down a road more than positive comments, because you don't have to check those out so much. But, you start checking them out and you say, oh, well, what is their story here? What really is the story? And you have to, dig deeper. And I did this as I, did investigative stories. And then sometimes it's a matter of news judgment. So some years ago, I became an assistant managing editor at a local paper in Connecticut. And we had a police reporter. And about 6:00 p.m., he called me, who was the assistant, who was the one there in charge, and said, hey, did you hear about this? An abandoned baby was found in the grocery store. And I said, oh, well, we got to get on that. And I told the editors and said, hey, this is going to be coming, because it was late. And I asked one of the reporters to do a story. And she handed me like 2 paragraphs. And I said, no, this is a big story, no, we need more than that. And of course, with a timeline at the time, we had to jump from page 1, to say story here. And on my way to the paper the next morning, I heard NBC News, talk, they were at the grocery shop, checking this story out. So I knew, it was a big story. And that's one of the things that somebody who has experience can bring to something like that. And maybe somebody who, hadn't been in the news very long didn't say, that is kind of crazy. This is a medium-sized city, like who leaves an abandoned baby? And then, you had to then find out where the abandoned baby, like the law behind that, because there's laws about, if you leave an abandoned baby in a hospital versus if you leave it in a store. And, then try to contact the eyewitnesses. And, so I knew that was a big story. Whereas there are other times that, if I go to hear the president of Argentina, I don't know it's going to be a big story, but I have to be prepared that it's going to be a big story. So, and whereas sometimes, it can be like in the case with DHL, but if you're, something happens at a local school board and somebody then says, oh, he was taking money from this fund, and you wouldn't know that going in, and you might not report that right away, but you check the facts and something can blow up.
And this is a great segue. And let's talk about things blowing up. Your hashtag women to follow. Let's hear
Yes.
the story. 12 million views. How did that start? Let's hear the origins of Women to Follow and spotlight that for a moment here, because I have some comments coming in. I'll bring them up as you start the conversation.
I see some people here, few maybe my grown kids, and I see Stephen Kaplan is here, who's a journalist and became a producer for my live stream show, and is a great was a news editor at the New York Times, and is a great visual and social media storyteller. So thank you, Stefan, for being here. How did it come about? Chance, not chance, but I was at the gym, finished an exercise class, went out to the lobby to check my feed, what was going on in social media. And I saw this story from somebody saying that, that there was a study done, and that of all the journalists in DC, in the Beltway, of the 3,200 journalists, 82% of men followed and retweeted men. And then I was really like, and then the next statistic I read was that the same proportion was true for women, that women retweeted and followed men by the same, 82% also. And I said to myself, like, this is crazy, this is crazy. And I put out this tweet and said, let's get this party started. I'm going to name 3 women to follow. And I used the hashtag, which, I made up on the spot at the Y, and tagged people in Liza Donnelly, who's a cartoonist, and people who are in business or in government and different fields. And it went out. And then I went to the library to write a story I was doing. And like my feed was just like, it just exploded. And people were naming people from all over the world, to amplify their voices. And that happened, that was going on. A friend saw that happening. She offered to make like a woman to follow list, so we could get all those names and share them so people could have those resources, the resources to do that. And then I was asked to be, there was a group called Gender Avenger, which was, from, if you can tell from the name, was dedicated to, hearing more voices from women and tracking, like at a conference, they would track how many women spoke and how many men and the airtime for each. And they featured me. They asked me to write a story about how, the hashtag inspired a movement. And then I was a guest on some other podcasts. And that's how that was the, so it wasn't like something I thought of, okay, now how can I amplify women? Let's see, let's think of a hashtag, it wasn't.
Well, it stuck, it resonated. And
Yes.
I'm sure being an advocate and an ally for women's rights in globally, I would imagine that there were some men in there following and supporting that hashtag as well. Now, was this an inspiration, or did this inspire your pivot from traditional journalism and start that live streaming idea for you? Is that where
No,
that moment happened?
I started at the Associated Press, which is the wire service, and covering general news. And my job at the time was to open the bureau at 6 a.m. and put out shorts, that were for the noon broadcast, and then I wrote stories, covered stories. I worked in a story out in Pittsburgh. I worked in Charleston, West Virginia. And then I started with a business paper in New York City on Wall Street, and was covering international trade and shipping. And then, as things, as newspapers declined or whatever, I began writing for digital publications and all kinds of, and I wrote for Forbes. I did an investigative piece. I did a few pieces for the New York Times and other places. And then I was seeing the rise of, what was happening on social media and the importance of Twitter, especially in journalism. So I got a Twitter account and started paying attention and going to like social media weekends and learning and also sort of meeting community of people who were either journalists or nonprofits or people who were interested in how to use social media to get out their message. So that then I became active on Twitter and liked Twitter because in a way like the AP, something happened, you put it out, and I had the skills from my training, to take notes really quickly. And I guess there was actually I covered, now with a phone, you can do everything. So
Yep.
in 2016, in the elections, there was a rally at New York Public Library, and I went. And there were speakers and poets and musicians, and I started videotaping. And then I said, oh, I can put this out on social media. And I was able, with just my phone, to check the name of the song that this chorus was, this choir was singing, I knew, who the poets were, checked the names and, handles of the poets and put this out. And it really got a lot of attention. And that was not as, I was not on staff as a reporter or, a stringer. This is the power which, that's changed in media.
Awesome. Jay, what a story in journalism. How much does that resonate with you?
Oh my gosh. Brings back a lot of memories from the local side. Like, so first off, I'm from an island, so it's a microcosm of what happens, in the contiguous United States. So so just to share something with you, when I was a cub reporter, I would look down at this desk, and embedded in the desk was this little green screen. And across that green screen came the AP wire. And I was like, wow. I was amazed that we would be getting information from national news organizations and from international news organizations in this little screen. And this was before the days of Google. So the AP was the source, right? It wasn't like you could go to your phone and get that information right away. And so for me as a cub reporter, seeing that and having access to that before it was even printed the next day, I was like in Disneyland. For me, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Right? Rose, you're laughing, but you remember those were the days, right? And then I could smell the print room as they were firing up the presses. You could smell the ink waft through the entire building. And this was the days of print. And then I moved into radio news, right? And in radio news, oh my gosh, things were like, you got to do it now. You got to go on live now. You got to cut that down to 2 sentences. I was like, two sentences? There's no way. No way. And now that's the norm. That's the norm.
But you get to be a better writer, and as you see what's essential to tell the story.
So is it short and snappy and just try to hook them?
Right.
And accurate.
Right.
And accurate.
And absolutely. Did you get 3 sources? Are there 3 sources on this story? Because we're not running it if it's not 3 sources. And I was like, are you kidding me? I have 2 hours. 2 hours? There's no way. And then on top of that, I moved into TV. Right now, I got to think about images to go with this. Are you serious? Right? And so I have to coordinate with my cameraman. Get this shot. Make sure you get a wide shot of this. Make sure you get a short shot of that. And then put all of that together. And you only have 30 minutes to do it. Have fun. Right? So those were the things that as a kid, I came right up. And I had a blessing to be able to go straight from high school into the news business, into the news room. Cool. To be able to experience all that. I was literally having fun. A kid in a candy store doing this. And just to give you a little bit of my creative way of writing poetry, it's going to sound really bad for my publisher. But I procrastinate so that I can get to that, 30 minutes. You got to put it all out there. And then I gotta have like real big speakers behind me and a TV blaring at the same time, just so I can get that hint of a newsroom. I know it sounds crazy.
It's funny. No, I think I write poetry, and I was taking classes in Manhattan, and I'd be on the train and I'd have to finish a sonnet, and there I was, on the train. I could work anywhere, really, because of that, now people, I guess that wasn't a thing then, more you worked in your office, or you had your cubicle or whatever. But, as a journalist, it was an open, newsroom, or and you wanted to hear noise. The TV was always on because you needed to hear the latest, and you had the wires. So there's always you're always juggling and always seeing what's you had to be on. You're always on.
That's fantastic. Listen, I left this comment up by Craig. Rose has inspired me beyond words. I can't thank her enough. So you're touching people, real people in real time. And listen, I know Jay mentioned earlier, yes, I started a community over at school. It's called Your Stage Community. And we have community members here listening in who similarly are looking for that inspiration to help them move ever so closely to going live and having live moments of their own. And who better to be part of the community? Rose, thank you for being part of the community. Jay, thank you for being part of the community. But you have 300 live stream episodes under your belt. And
400.
We're up to 400 now?
Well, if
All
you
right.
count
So let's talk
the
let's talk
co-production, being a producer and my own shows, yeah.
Let's talk about that inspiration. How can, whether it was through journalism, what really helped you get into that whole live stream, and how can we help those who are with us in the community and perhaps those who are not part of the community, but still, what lessons can we share with them?
Let's see. I think, it helped to have some experience in knowing, what would, you always have to say, like, it's storytelling, right? So whether I'm going to tell somebody's story in print or I'm going to have them on the air, on a broadcast, and I'm going to interview them about their, their journey and how they first got this way, what their, first, first book was, or what the first book they read was, or where they went to school, or what got them interested in this field. You're always asking that question, whether and so the medium, it doesn't matter really, because it's the storytelling that counts. And for me, when you have a chance, if it's not a breaking story, and I know I'm going to interview these two journalists from the Washington Post, and that was like only 10 minutes, but, I'm going to look at their bios and look at their names of their books and, whatever I can before I get on the air. And if it's a show where I'm, I've invited somebody, I vet them, I look at them. I also check out usually, how are they? I Google the name and see what podcast they've been on, so I can get a sense of how they are in the air and if that's going to, be a good guest. So there's a lot of factors, that go into, and are they going to, reach my audience? So with our, COVID show, we did everything from I'd interview doctors to we'd interview actors, and what were they doing during the pandemic, to groups that were suddenly, forming nonprofits and bringing food into schools, or I'm trying to remember everything. And to be really, you have to be, well, with that kind of show, I was always watching the news. And so like I saw a girl who's 17 saw that she complained that Trader Joe's was racist in their advertising. And I got hold of her, and she was on the show that night. And I called up my, three and said, hey, I got, so-and-so. And so it's really keeping, that's another level, I guess. But, keeping your eyes out for who would be a good guest, who has a good story to tell, how, if you can tell that story, and if that is going to meet the, what your audience wants to hear about.
Yeah, so I'm picking up on a few things here, and Jay, perhaps you can kind of pick up if I missed anything. So one thing that really stood out to me is vetting your guests and really understanding. So that touches on visibility, credibility. I wouldn't just let someone else join me if I knew little to nothing about them. So yes, I completely agree and support that. Bring someone that's going to drive value. Bring someone, but you owe it to them to do a little bit of homework, and you owe it to yourself to do a little bit of homework, because you want that to be part of the narrative. Coach
And
Carey,
everything is, your reputation.
everything
so
is your reputation. So for
everything's your
instance,
reputation.
I'm going to take the start of today's show. It just makes my skin cringe when, after all the testing, things happen. But Coach Carey, and I want to thank her, this is a compliment. I love how you make overcoming challenges part of the intro. And hey, we had a hiccup. That's part of my narrative, my responsibility as a producer and a coach, to help others realize that, hey, you show up as you are, and there's always that opportunity that no matter how prepared you think you are, something's going to respond. And you touched on it, Rose, being able to respond quickly and how you bounce back. People resonate with that, right? If we just had some dead air and a lack of transparency as to what was happening, then it kind of touches on our reputation. But because we there was a moment of vulnerability, but we were transparent. We talked through what had happened. People will still resonate, and you continue to build trust. And because that's part of my story, I'm proud to say, it's okay. Things are gonna falter. You're going to veer off, but people are paying close attention to how you get back into your lane. And I'm glad that Carey pointed it out. I thank her for sharing that. Jay, any thoughts? What would you like to add before we ask Rose our next question?
Well, even in the days of legacy media, things are going to happen. Live shots are not going to happen exactly as you intended. People are going to walk through your live shot, maybe in front of your live shot. All of those things can happen. You could actually break your normal glasses and have to put on sunglasses, and you're sitting on the anchor desk. And then you get a call from the producer of the show at the end, who does normally the weekdays, now calling you, asking you, why did you do that? Did that happen to me? Absolutely. Why are you wearing shades on TV on the live show? What's happening? I was like, oh no. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. I didn't have another extra pair, and it was 10 seconds to count down, so you have 10 seconds before the 10-second count. And I was scrambling, and the best thing I could do was put on my shades. I apologize. I wasn't trying to look cool, but there you go. And, you just have to roll with the punches. But what's important especially for journalists, is sometimes the presentation is going to be sloppy, right? Sometimes it's not going to go as planned, but are you giving the information the people need and deserve that's going to allow them to make decisions that day or days going forward? And if you can answer that question and be able to sleep at night, then you're doing your job. Now, if you don't care one bit, I'm sorry, this is not the profession for you, right? So those are the things you just have to consider. Now, things have changed a lot in the days of social media.
Yes.
But if you go back to the tenets of journalism, if you look at Walter Cronkite, the founders of, true journalism going forward from that moment in time where news was shared so that people were informed, you're going to see the progression. But you should always look at, is this something that our audience needs, they're going to be able to use on a day-to-day basis, that's going to help them make decisions for themselves, their families, and the ones that they care about. That's something that should be on everybody's minds, whether you're a traditional journalist or whether you're an influencer. That's just my opinion.
Well, even when I did these social media workshops, one of the things that I learned from Srinivasan was he said he takes at least like 10 minutes to do a tweet, and that a tweet should do a few things. One, you want to inform, right? You want to entertain in some way, and you want to reach your, have something, valuable to get, to and think about your audience. So even with something that might be 3 lines and a picture or a video, you're communicating, and you still have to find the essence of what it is you're communicating, whether it's in a, two sentences that a broadcaster is going to read, or what you put out on a tweet.
So we have a question to,
and I just want to give a shout out, if I may.
Yeah,
Stephanie
absolutely. Go ahead.
Buchanan Jansen, I see you here. I haven't seen you in maybe since the days of Twitter, so we should catch up. And I'm so honored to have my producer here, Stefan Kaplan. He's really, everybody should follow him. He's Spin It Social on all platforms. And then it's great to meet all the new people that are part of your school community. And Craig, which I said, and Keith, who I've known since the days of the pandemic, which is cool. And he's always fun. And learned a lot from him too. So just want to give a few shout outs.
Awesome. Yeah. Listen, this is a community, and I like the fact that we're taking time to give the shout outs, and being appreciative of those who are joining us. If you're not already connected with members here on this call or on this chat, there's some wonderful people here that I agree, Rose, reach out and connect with them, and support their journey, and as they build their stages. Layla has dropped a question asking, what have you learned from interviewing people?
That's a little question. Okay, let's see. There's so much you learn. But one of the things that I like to always, if I'm interviewing a guest on my show, it's sort of, I would like to find the essence of why they're doing what they're doing, and so they could have this title and they can tell me how they got there, and the books they've written, the schools they went to, the conferences they've, all their experience, if they've become a doctor or they've become an author or an on-air personality, an actress, I want to know, like, what's the seed? Because to me, that, like, you find your passion. And for me, I found my passion, early, and not everybody does. But to me, that's sort of getting that, like, it's like that kernel of truth, that seed, what makes you want to be who you are. And I think that's always interesting for viewers to hear, what in your life, what made you want to become who you are today. And then there's always pivots, why did you change, and all those things.
So let the record show Craig loves you. It's great to be loved.
Craig.
So
Craig is out in California, and he's a do-gooder, and we know each other from earlier days in Twitter.
So it is a beautiful thing to see those who follow you continue to follow you, because I'm sure these are relationships that you've kind of nurtured over the years and cultivated over the years. And it's just beautiful to see people wanting to and continue to want to be part of your journey, your message. And that is, that's touching. I really, really pay close attention to that. So kudos to you.
Kudos to you for, getting me, this is great that all these people who some of them, I haven't heard from in a while, seeing them find me here. So that's the power of live streaming, you see.
That is the power of live stream. So
and social media, and that, you put it out on LinkedIn, and you put it out on Substack, and, people who are watching and know my name or know your name, or, they say, oh, well, I gotta, let me tune in for that.
We want to be part of that. And the heavy lifting really starts after the live. The live conversation is the core of of the value that this message is bringing. We took time to plan it, to promote it. We're enjoying the real time moment here with our friends, our guests, and our listeners. But we want to continue this legacy, and this will be repurposed, and it will continue to find a home in social media so that people can come back and listen to what they missed. Now, I know we're nearing the top of the hour, but I want to take a moment, if we're still good for time, I want to take a moment on something that I know is important to you. And I was hoping that we can take a few minutes and talk about visibility and AI. And, you're not the only one talking about this, but there is, for some reason, a lot of noise and a lot of attention, rightfully so, attention on how AI has become part of our daily lives. But for women specifically, are you adequately being represented? And I know there's a lot of people who are advocating for change, or just raising awareness around what AI is doing, the optics of AI with gender bias. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I'm will be announcing, but I'm planning a show. I have a few guests lined up to do a show in mid-March, sometime during Women's History Month, which should be every day of the year, right? Which about AI and women's representation and visibility. Because I do think there are a few factors at work here. One, like, I pay attention to what I see. So if I am watching a broadcast and there's talking about AI, the only woman I usually see is a journalist who is at the Wall Street Journal, who does podcasting now, Kara Swisher. And she's like the representative for all women on AI and tech. But I know that when the tech guys go to DC, and I think Time just had one of their covers was, what's coming in AI. And it was 6 or 7 men on the cover of this, Time magazine. And when President Biden, when he, convened a summit of AI, you only saw men in the picture, even though you read the story and like Mura Murati, who now has her own company, but was an OpenAI, I think at OpenAI, she was there. She was like chief technology officer, or they were, lots of roles. But when you look at, and then you have to look at that. So why aren't we seeing them? And there are multiple reasons. And one of them is that there are less women in developers and researchers in AI. And that affects going down the road. Like, I did a story with someone, a show with someone in AI. And she said, and this was a few years ago, but she said she asked AI to show her a new, an office space and show the people in there working. It showed her all men. And then she asked it to show her some women, and they showed men at the computer, like their desktops or whatever. And the women were like on the banisters, so who's writing who's developing, because AI is all based on what's put into the system, right? And it keeps building. So if you're a researcher, a developer, you're an engineer, if all those engineers are men, well, that's going to be reflected, and that is going to create bias. So not only do you have few women developers, but then it serves as if you're a young woman and you're 12 and you're experimenting with AI, like, why do you want to go into AI if all you see are men and white men? So there's such a that's part of the whole reason for what I did with my tweet, which was, to start a movement that we are amplifying women's voices. And when we did the live stream show, the COVID show, we had goals. So it was okay to have, 2 men on a show, but, like on a panel, but if it was going to be 3, that wasn't okay. Now, it was first, it was okay to have like all women, as long as, you made sure they were diverse, because we have a long way to catch up. Right. So you really have to pay attention. And when we looked at the numbers, Of the 450 guests we booked on that show in those 250 episodes, 56% were women. And that is a very high percentage in this field. So, you know, you have to be intentional. And I think with AI, the problem is, you know, just as we had, and it's not over with STEM, you know, but if you don't see women doing jobs as scientists, you know, well, what's going to make, you know, you want to become a scientist? And it's still so weighted. Like when I started doing my Women to Follow and Wikipedia, you know, of the biographies on Wikipedia, when I was doing this, when I started, it was like 16% were women. And now I think it's up to 19%. So you don't get there by, you know, sitting on your, sitting down, you know, and not doing anything. You've got to get there by, you know, finding the woman so that, you know, the women are there. You just have to make people aware of them so that when they are going to look to book a guest or they're, you know, finding sources for a story, whether it be broadcast, print, digital, however they're doing it, you know, there are women, the women are there. And the more you uplift them, the better that will set the stage for the next generation.
That is beautiful. There's a few things running through my head because when I read your Substack on that experiment, I went in and I tried to prompt engineer, and just as you had written, if you just ask a general question, it will predominantly show a man in the picture. So you really have to write it into your prompt that what and who you want to include in the image that's being created. Now, this could also be argued that women are more creative than men, not needing to rely on AI as much, because these large language models are learning from those who are filling it up with prompt, right? Prompt engineering. So if you get more men who aren't as creative asking for help, then it's going to mansplain through AI. It's going to give that. I think there's a silver lining there, but.
Well, one of the interesting things as I've been researching this is that there are some reports coming out that it's going to be an issue that women are in the workforce are using AI less than their male colleagues. And is that going to be, you know, that's going to hinder them down the road, since we know AI is going to, you know, it's going to be everywhere, right? But on the other hand, part of the resistance of women not to use AI in their jobs is, one, they think they're more insecure that somebody will say, oh, well, she's using AI, you know, she wrote this with AI. And the second being that women tend to be a little more wary, since so many.
Oh, we lost Rose. Let's bring her back in. All right.
Didn't touch anything. Okay.
You're back.
Okay. So I was saying, yeah, that, you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Either, you know, if you don't have women using it, well, then are they going to fall behind? On the other hand, women are being more cautious because they you know, women want more guardrails in how AI is created and how we monitor it, and, you know, for bias and you know, online violence and things, you know, those things. So yes, and I hope that if women are more involved, it will be more creative, because, you know, and that's why you want women and men, because they may think differently, you know.
Well, if we were to compare, okay, we're comparing AI in this particular instance, but when we look at the DEI movement, that took years to kind of catch up, and AI is moving faster than we can keep up. So I really hope that we can close that gap quicker than we were able to with the whole diversity movement and the equality movement. So
I will say that like 22%, women account for about 22% of everyone, you know, of people working in AI. And as far as researchers and developers, it's less. It's like 12 to 18%. So we have a long way to go, and the more people like you and allies and people bring this to the attention of make this people aware of. I think awareness is such an important part of how we become educated and change.
Jay, would you like to add?
Oh man, so this is really something that I've been thinking about. Marginalized people, right, and how they fit into the equation of AI and the scalability and adaptability of AI. As a indigenous person from the island of Guam, right, how is this impacting me in the way I use it? And you do see, AI bias in there, and how it responds to me. And so there's a couple of ways that you can actually handle this on your own. And one of those ways is through a master prompt. Okay. And so what a master prompt is taking all uncomfortable, right? You're going to be using it all the time. And for it to get to know you, you put in all your information, everything that you think is relevant to what you're going to be doing with AI. So maybe a resume, maybe your CV, maybe some of the books that you've written, maybe the entire book you wrote, right? All of those things to give it context so that the next time you write something or call on ChatGPT, Claude, or whoever, whatever, right? You want to put that master prompt ahead of what it is that you want it to do so that now there's context. It says, okay, I'm going to respond to Jay based on this master prompt of who he is and what he does, all of those things. And so I know it's annoying as all get out for some people, but it helps. It helps me in using that tool to get it to do what I want it to do, to make sure that it understands it from my perspective. And it's not spitting or mansplaining in another ethnicity back to me. I don't need that. What I need is something that'll help me that's germane to me. Now, on a wider scale, on a 10,000-foot level, if we keep doing that, all us marginalized peoples, including women, we keep inputting, putting information in, it's going to help those models improve, and it'll allow us more of a footprint on AI. So the more we move back and hold ourselves back from it, we're actually doing ourselves a disservice. I think we should be more involved. And if we get those surveys that say, hey, would you like to be a part? Yes, 100%. I'm there. Jump in. So, these are some of the things that we're dealing with as marginalized communities when dealing with AI, and how we use it is, and it goes back to the tech phrase, garbage in, garbage out, right? So if we're putting something in, we've got to be putting in what we want so that when we pull from it, it's going to give us what we want. See what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So, and I love, I can see why Craig loves you. You're amazing. I love your insights on it. I was asked whether or not age is an asset in a little survey. And I said, I did the whole obviously cliche thing, fine wine. But when you get to a certain age and you've experienced all these experiences, you get to have a sort of an insight on certain things. And so, the more we, and I'm going back to AI, the more we put our insights in there and we develop this, right? The years that we put in, we're going to see an exponential growth that's going to be beneficial to us, all the people who are marginalized in this new age
So Coach Carrie Willis, such a great conversation. She's loving this. And I'm so happy that you're loving this, because this is what we want to do here on the Storytelling Journeys, is help people through demonstration, through real life conversations, bring value through storytelling, and help people realize if you feel overwhelmed, listen, there's an entire community here who's open and ready and prepared to support you, your story, your narrative, no matter where you find yourself, regardless of what gender bias you might feel part of. Listen, this is a open community, embraced to welcome everyone through storytelling. And I am just pleased that our audience members are enjoying this. We are at the top of the hour, and I want to be mindful of Rose's time. Rose, your hashtag, your movement, your story, where to from here? What's coming? What's in the pipeline? What can you share with us?
I think I have this show on AI coming, and I had thought of doing like a bigger event, but I need some more time to plan a bigger event like I had done a few years ago. I did a summit on Woman to Follow. A Woman to Follow summit. I had 3 panels. I had 2 producers. It was global guests, and once, and also managed to get some sponsors so that we could, pay for our producers and pay for software. And, so I thought that this maybe needed a longer timeline to do something like that. And so the other way I'm thinking about this is maybe, I'll do a show in parts, since I have mapped out some of the areas I want to cover in AI, and I'm always looking, for other experts. And I do have, like, for example, a Twitter list. You can still do that on Twitter. There's a list I have for, woman to follow in AI, and I, curate that. And then when I want to do a ghost story, it's one place I can look for, who I want to interview. If it's a woman who's developing AI, an engineer, or so my goal is not to, I still would love to do. I did a story. I interviewed a judge who was the first to do a reform, first judge to have a court that addressed people's mental health issues, as they were, and went, so that they didn't end up in jail again. And so really pioneers in many fields, and there are, there are women to follow, like you can look up in medicine. But the idea of this is maybe also people have, guests have said to me, why don't you do a mastermind, have all those guests, then, they can talk amongst each other, and also they could teach other people about what they're doing and how they do it. So, to continue my, I'm now on Substack, which is like about a few weeks. And I've been on Medium, but I see a lot of movement in Substack. And one of the things you can do in Substack, as opposed to, I'm not sure, I haven't checked it out, but I see people going live on Substack. And when there's news that happens, it can be very effective a lot of times it can be effective. But one of the shows that I think the show that I had the most live viewers was a show I did less than 2 weeks after Russia invaded Ukraine. And I was watching the news and only seeing men talking, because it was international national security experts, and they're not going to bring on a lot of women generals, usually not, So I said, I want to see, who are the women, and the women in Ukraine are, getting the families out of Ukraine into safety, and the women are fighting in the war, and the women are reporting, and that show had 11,000, live viewers. And that's part of knowing, when something's timely and when to, jump on it. And one of the things I think that Substack lets people do is to go live, go live with, I think you can go live up to 2 people, unless you have a third party, streaming service. So, and I also have a book coming out. I'm also a poet,
All right,
And
let's plug
yeah.
the book.
yeah,
Well,
it's not out yet.
Jay is
Just
also
take
a poet, and we have Mike
Ooh.
LeBlanc, who's in the audience, also a poet. Listen, we got a poetry panel in the making here.
Yeah, I've been writing poetry since I was, 8, and been in some journals and done readings and studied with a lot of poets and have taught poetry to kids and also adults. And my husband and I are doing a book called, it will be called Two Sides to Everything. And it's sort of taking, and he's a comedy writer, and I'm like, the one like writing stories that change legislation, or, the lyrical shells, at the beach, and the colors, and where it seems like a bee is, down my knees, is sort of, so like, we took, so there'll be a book coming out by Simon and Schuster in 2027, and we will be co-authors.
Beautiful.
So that is very exciting to have, and to like, we're still talking, so it worked.
That's beautiful. Jay, closing remarks, questions before we thank our guest for spending a wonderful hour with us.
Sure. I think I want to kind of dive deep a little bit real quick before we go. It's something for people to think about. Maybe, Rose, you can talk just a little bit about it. When I was starting out as a cub reporter, as I mentioned, back home on this tiny little island, the native inhabitants, the indigenous people, Chamorro people, were trying to get back land that was held by the federal government, lands that were taken by the federal government after World War II. And so they were doing protests, and they were some of them were very confrontational with the federal government and with the military. And a lot of the people in the newsroom didn't look like me, just so you know. And I will never forget, there was a panel of journalists who were talking about journalism and the sanctity of information being shared with masses. And one of my mentors was asked about bias. And we're talking about bias today. And he says, there's a myth, and it is a myth that reporters don't have bias. That's false. And I looked at it and I was like, reporters aren't supposed to be biased, right? But he said this: I'm a human being. Of course I have biases. Are you crazy? What are you talking about? And he's from New York. What are you talking about? And so, so I said, yeah, what are you talking about? And he said, but the good journalists are the ones that are able to present the facts and the information that we all need, in spite of the bias that we have. And so that's the difference. He says we're all going to come with our biases, where our environment, how we were raised, all of those things. I'm a human being just like you, right? And so these are the things that we have to struggle with when we're sharing that information. We're sharing our stories with other people. And this is why how we interact with AI, to me, is important, because of those biases, right? Because how does an algorithm learn that trait that a human being has? You see what I'm saying? So I think what you're saying, what you're talking about, is really true. And for us who are marginalized in society in general, and how we use AI as a tool is important. And so when the people in the newsroom who didn't look like me refused to cover these protests, I raised my hand. I said, let me go out there, and in spite of my bias, please, God, help me break this story so that people can be informed and understand what the plight of my people is. So these are the things that we struggle with. And I think that, as marginalized communities, these are the struggles that we deal with. How do we impact our community in such a way, in spite of our biases, we're being truthful, one, and impactful to everyone, not just the ones that we want to impact.
It's very true. And one of the things, I've done a lot of business reporting. And one of the things I always remember is anyone has to be able to understand this story. Just as they might say, well, you're from Guam and you have a certain point of view. But if you've done your reporting well, you are showing the context of what you're writing about. And it's going to mean something to everyone because you're going to hit a nerve because, it's not that you're trying to write at a low, like first grade level, but what you're doing is raising everyone's consciousness by showing, by writing something that anyone can read or, anyone can hear on the news. And that is so important.
Beautiful. Listen, it has been an absolute pleasure. I can't thank you enough for spending the last hour with us. It's not the end of this story. You'll continue to see me share parts of today's narrative with my community across my social channels, so that the legacy continues to grow, and more allies and more support around women to follow your movement and just support women across all industries globally. So for those in the audience, I want to thank those who are still around. If you're listening in or tuning in on Team Replay, feel free to engage in the comments. The comments will not be ignored. We will continue to respond after the show is over. But for now,
let me just say,
Yes,
I'm open to, I am on all platforms. I'm on LinkedIn and Substack and, you name it. I guess I'm on everywhere except maybe TikTok so far. So, reach out to me if you have ideas for great, guests or areas you think that are not getting covered in the news in regards to women or stories not being told. I want to hear from you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Jay,
And
thanks
thank you
again.
so much. Thank you so much for being such great hosts and dealing with and it was really an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Jay, we'll catch you on the other side. Stay in touch, everyone. And thanks. I'll be closing the room. And until next time.